The Galactic Council chamber loomed in silence as hundreds of representatives from across the galaxy gathered in their elevated seats. The room's curvature seemed to stretch on forever, its smooth, glowing walls reflecting the intricate patterns of alien life forms, each as distinct as the stars themselves. The hum of conversation in a myriad of languages filled the air, a soft murmur that hinted at the weight of the decisions yet to come. Despite their varied shapes, sizes, and features, one thing united the assembly: their amusement at the lone human standing at the center of it all. Ambassador Nathan Rhodes stood firm, his back straight, his eyes unwavering. Clad in the simple blue diplomatic uniform of Earth's core, he seemed almost too small against the vastness of the chamber. He could feel the weight of the laughter cascading toward him from every direction, each chuckle more dismissive than the last. I propose that humanity be added to the restricted species list under Galactic Law 5962. Nathan's voice cut through the laughter with an air of finality. I request that appropriate containment protocols be established to regulate our expansion and interactions with other civilizations. The laughter that followed was not only loud but reverberated, mocking the mere thought of such a proposal. A Zalari representative, one of the insectoid races, snickered, clicking its mandibles in a sound almost too loud to be considered anything but derision. From the upper tiers of the chamber, Councillor Zixtal, a member of the Athi species, leaned forward, his expression betraying a sharp sense of superiority. "Is this some kind of joke, Ambassador Rhodes?" Zixtal's voice was smooth with mocking amusement. "What possible threat could humans pose to us? Are we also going to restrict the expansion of domesticated pets because one might bite?" The chamber erupted into laughter again, the sound echoing off the walls, but Nathan remained stoic, standing without flinching. He knew it would take more than mockery to make them listen, but he had something they would not laugh at for long. Sixtal continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your species mastered space travel a mere 50 standard years ago. My people had already developed antimatter weaponry, while your ancestors were still struggling to build basic infrastructure." At that, the council's laughter died down slightly, but only for a moment. Nathan adjusted his stance, preparing to speak, his calm demeanor cutting through the rippling waves of ridicule. "The Athi Confederation may have been spacefaring for millennia," Nathan responded evenly, "but even the oldest species have their limitations. It is not your history that defines your future. It is your adaptability to new threats." His voice rang out, crisp and measured. "What I am proposing is not an attack. It's a measure of precaution." Grand Arbiter Vexer, the ancient leader of the council, raised his hand, calling for order. His translucent skin shimmered as he gestured for quiet, his voice reverberating throughout the room. "The council will respect the right of all members to be heard," Vexer said, his voice resonating with authority, though his gaze lingered on Nathan with an expression that bordered on bemusement. The laughter from the council members slowly simmered down as the arbiter's command settled the room. Nathan, sensing the shift, did not hesitate. "I have prepared evidence that I believe the council needs to see," he declared, his voice unwavering. "Evidence?" A ripple of laughter spread again, but it was more subdued this time, as the council leaned in, intrigued by Nathan's sudden confidence. He had managed to arrest their attention for a moment, but it was clear he would need more than words to convince them. With a single motion, Nathan activated the display panel at his side. The chamber lights dimmed, and the large heads-up display flared to life with a holographic image of a lush green world, its two moons orbiting slowly in the background. A calm, peaceful scene of Epsilon Indy 4, a frontier world located 20 light-years from Earth, appeared before the council. "This is Epsilon Indy 4, Nathan said, "a peaceful, uninhabited world that we began studying 6 months ago. Our research team established an outpost there, purely for scientific purposes. There was no military interest, no territorial ambitions." The view zoomed in on the outpost, a simple collection of structures nestled among thick, purple trees. The human scientists could be seen moving in and out of buildings, collecting plant samples and studying the wildlife. The tranquility of the scene was almost serene, and for a moment, The council seemed to forget the tension in the room, lost in the simplicity of the image. Nathan paused, allowing the council to absorb the peacefulness of the scene. Then, with the press of a button, the footage shifted and everything changed. The scene suddenly jerked, and the once calm surroundings of the outpost were shattered by the roar of incoming engines. A massive ship, jagged and angular, descended from the clouds. The image flickered as alien words flooded the screen, but the translation was immediate. This was Drakari technology. The Drakari, a predatory species notorious for raiding weaker civilizations, had arrived. A Drakari ship landed on the perimeter of the outpost, crushing trees and sending shockwaves through the ground. The camera cut to Dr. Alan Mitchell, a senior scientist, who stood at the outpost's edge, his hands raised in an effort to signal peace. The council members' initial amusement was wiped away in an instant, replaced with a palpable shift in the atmosphere. This was not a routine incident. This was something dangerous. Dr. Mitchell, I am of the Drakari Imperium, came the cold voice of the alien commander, transmitted clearly across the council chamber. This world belongs to us now. Your people must vacate immediately or face the consequences. Mitchell's voice, though firm, showed signs of strain. We are here under the protection of the Galactic Council. This world is a registered research zone, he stated, his words measured despite the growing tension. But the Drakari commander, Vorkar, was unmoved. The council has no power here, he hissed, his voice dripping with menace. This is your final warning. Before Mitchell could respond, the commander acted with terrifying swiftness. In an instant, he crossed the distance between them, seized Dr. Wright, another scientist, and snapped her neck before the stunned cameras. The room gasped collectively, their shock reverberating through the chamber. The video paused. Nathan let the silence linger in the council chamber for a moment. He didn't need to say anything. The message was clear. The stakes were now undeniable. This is the reality of what we face, Nathan said quietly. This is the world we live in, the one where humanity is not the predator, but the prey. The council sat in a stunned silence. Their earlier mockery was gone, replaced by a creeping unease. Nathan's words and the footage of humanity's first real taste of galactic aggression had left them questioning everything they thought they knew. You may continue, Vexer finally said, his voice low and grave, though his respect for Nathan's composure was evident. Nathan's calm resolve had turned the tide of the chamber's laughter into something far more serious. Humanity's presence in the galaxy was no longer a laughing matter, and now the Council would have to confront the uncomfortable reality of just how much humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. The atmosphere in the Council chamber had shifted. The once raucous laughter that had filled the room now hung in silence. The entire assembly fixated on the human representative standing before them. Nathan Rhodes stood still, his posture firm as he awaited the next move. The council had heard his words, but he knew that without showing them the truth, their mockery would persist. You may proceed, Grand Arbiter Vexer's voice reverberated through the chamber, his glowing veins pulsing with the weight of his words. The council had seen many species come and go, but something in Nathan's unshaken demeanor told them this was different. They had dismissed humanity with laughter. Now that arrogance would be challenged. Nathan gave a single nod. With a deliberate movement, he pressed a button on the small device strapped to his wrist. Instantly, the room darkened, the ambient lights dimming as a massive laser plasma display flickered to life above them. The images that appeared on the display were crisp and clear, but nothing about them would prepare the council for the story about to unfold. It began innocuously enough, a peaceful view of Epsilon Indy 4. The camera showed the beautiful, vibrant world from orbit, its blue oceans and swirling clouds catching the light of a distant star. Slowly, the view zoomed in, offering a closer look at a simple research outpost nestled among purple forests. Scientists in white lab coats moved between structures, setting up equipment, collecting samples. The peace of the scene was almost tangible, the calm of a world untouched by the chaos that lay beyond it. This is Epsilon Indy 4, Nathan's voice broke the silence, a frontier world approximately 20 light-years from Earth. 6 months ago, we established a peaceful scientific outpost here to conduct environmental studies and catalog the local flora and fauna. The council leaned in, the weight of Nathan's words settling in the room. For the first time, the representatives seemed to pay attention. This was no war zone, no territorial dispute, just a small team of scientists looking to understand the galaxy around them. It was a normal, peaceful beginning until it wasn't. The camera shifted to a wide shot of the outpost, showing the scattered tents and modular buildings surrounded by dense alien vegetation. A few of the researchers could be seen walking between structures, engaged in their work, unaware of the danger creeping toward them from above. Then a distant rumble, faint at first but growing rapidly louder. "What's that?" one of the off-screen scientists asked, his voice edged with confusion. The sound intensified, and the footage suddenly cut to the sky. An immense warship, dark and angular, descended from the clouds. The sleek black hull of the vessel gleamed menacingly, its weapons visible along the edges. The council gasped in shock, the sudden appearance of such a ship shattering the peaceful image on the screen. "The Drakari," a voice murmured from the council, the words spreading like wildfire. The Drakari, a brutal and predatory species known for their raids on weaker civilizations, had arrived. The camera swung to the ground below, capturing the chaos as the ship landed with a deafening crash. Trees were flattened beneath its massive weight as the ramp extended, revealing the Drakari soldiers, tall, reptilian, and armored, emerging from the ship with weaponry drawn. They marched forward with a menacing, deliberate pace, their presence dominating the once serene scene. Dr. Alan Mitchell, the lead scientist, stepped forward. His hands were raised in a gesture of peace as he approached the encroaching Drakari forces. "I am Dr. Alan Mitchell of Earth," he called, his voice steady but tinged with a sense of urgency. "This is a peaceful research mission under the protection of the Galactic Council. We welcome you." The Drakari commander, Vorkar, stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with disdain beneath his helmet. His voice, cold and commanding, pierced the air. "Silence, human," he spat. "This world now belongs to the Drakari Imperium. Your outpost, your research, it is now property of High Commander Reskar." The council watched, their initial amusement evaporating. What had begun as a display of peaceful scientific exploration had now turned into a confrontation with a ruthless, predatory force. Dr. Mitchell stood his ground, his voice unwavering despite the threat. "We respect your people, Commander, but this world is registered with the Galactic Council as a protected research zone. We can contact Council representatives to discuss." But before he could finish, the Drakari commander moved with horrifying speed. He crossed the distance between them in mere moments, grabbing Dr. Wright, another scientist, by the throat with one hand and lifting her effortlessly into the air. The camera captured the moment with chilling clarity as Dr. Mitchell pleaded for the life of his colleague. "Please," he said, his voice steady, but his face a mask of desperation. "She's done nothing. We'll comply with your demands." Vorkar's eyes met Mitchell's, and for a brief moment there was a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, perhaps disdain, before he snapped Dr. Wright's neck with a swift motion, dropping her lifeless body to the ground. A collective gasp filled the council chamber, the horror of the moment settling over the room. The image of Dr. Wright's lifeless body, her blood staining the earth beneath her, was frozen in their minds. The council was no longer laughing. "One rotation," the Drakari commander snarled, turning to walk back to his ship. "One rotation, and we will return to collect what remains of your outpost." The camera remained on Dr. Mitchell as he knelt beside Dr. Wright's body. His face, once filled with shock, slowly transformed into something colder. Hardened, resolute. He turned to the camera, his eyes burning with a quiet fury. "Send the message," he said quietly. "Tell them exactly what happened here." Nathan let the silence linger, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle over the council. The footage had just begun, but already the room was a stark contrast to how it had been only moments before. The earlier mockery had been replaced with a profound unease. The calm and unassuming nature of humanity, so easily laughed off just a short time ago, was now seen through a different lens. The next scene in the video began, but Nathan didn't need to speak. The tension was palpable, and the Council had begun to realize humanity was not to be underestimated. The Drakari commander, Vorkar, stood tall over the outpost, his reptilian eyes glowing with contempt. His armor, gleaming under the harsh light of the alien planet, reflected the unease that hung in the air. The tension was palpable as he gazed down at the humans, their faces marked by the shock of what had just transpired. But none of them broke. None of them cowered. Enough! Vorkar's voice was low but carried through the stillness, echoing with authority. Surrender your outpost now, and we may spare your lives. Refuse, and you will meet the same fate as your colleague. Dr. Alan Mitchell stood motionless, his face a mask of unrelenting determination. Beside him, his team of researchers clutched their equipment, their breaths shallow but steady. They had heard the warning, yet there was no fear in their eyes. No, they weren't afraid. They were just waiting for a sign, a signal, something that would tell them it was time to act. A few meters away, Dr. Alaric Rhodes, Nathan's brother, stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the Drakari commander. There was no trace of fear on his face either, only the unshakable resolve of a man who knew what was at stake. No, Alaric said simply, his voice calm but firm. The response hung in the air for a moment. Vorkar's expression twisted in annoyance, his lips curling into a cruel smile as he stepped closer. You think you can defy us, human? Do you truly believe you have the strength to resist? You are no match for the Drakari Imperium. Alaric didn't flinch. You don't understand, Vorkar, he said, his words cutting through the thick tension of the moment. We don't need to match you in strength. We only need to survive long enough to remind the galaxy of one simple truth. Humans don't bow. Nathan, watching from the safety of the communication bay, could feel the weight of his brother's words. As Alaric spoke, he activated the internal comms and transmitted a message to Earth's military command. His fingers hovered over the console, the weight of the moment pressing on him. The message was simple, direct, a vow of retaliation. Earth will respond. We will not be silent. Back at the outpost, the Drakari forces were closing in, their weapons primed and ready. There was no turning back now. It was not just about the research anymore. It was about sending a message to the galaxy, to every predator that lurked in the darkness, waiting to strike. As Vorkar raised his hand, signaling his troops to advance, Alaric turned toward the team of researchers, his voice low, barely a whisper. We stand together. No matter what happens next, we hold our ground. The seconds that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. The Drakari moved like a tidal wave, relentless, forceful, and unwavering. Yet as they advanced, a quiet confidence settled over the humans. They had one advantage: time. The outpost's primary defense systems had been disabled by the initial attack, but there were backups, hidden, cloaked in secrecy, known only to a select few. A moment passed, and then another. With a single touch, Alaric activated the contingency protocols, setting off a chain reaction that would shake the foundation of the Drakari's assumptions. The ground beneath the Drakari soldiers' feet trembled as energy pulses erupted from the concealed defenses. The air crackled with the hum of energy discharges as a barrage of electromagnetic pulses struck the Drakari weapons, rendering them useless. The soldiers faltered for a fraction of a second, long enough for the humans to make their move. Now! Alaric shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of the attack. In an instant, the human researchers rushed to their positions, setting up barricades, reactivating weapon systems that had been dormant moments before. The once peaceful research station had transformed into a fortress of human ingenuity, responding to the Drakari threat with a precision that few in the galaxy would ever expect from a young species. The council chamber, still transfixed by the unfolding footage, watched in stunned silence. Each new piece of footage revealed a new layer of humanity's capabilities. What had started as a simple scientific mission was quickly morphing into an image of resilience, ingenuity, and the unyielding will to survive. The laser plasma display flickered as the scene shifted, showing Alaric standing firm against a Drakari soldier who lunged toward him with a weapon raised. Without hesitation, Alaric ducked, rolled, and seized a nearby piece of equipment, using it to disarm the attacker in a single fluid motion. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts, just action. "Keep them back," Alaric yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. In the council chamber, murmurs began to spread. The representatives, who had laughed just moments ago, now found themselves struggling to make sense of what they were seeing. Humanity, a species they had all but written off as weak, was holding its own against the Drakari. There was no panic, no overwhelming force, just a calm, calculated defense that was beginning to turn the tide. Then as the humans continued to press their advantage, the council's attention was drawn to another part of the video, a new transmission from Earth. Nathan Rhodes stood before the console, his face cold and unyielding as he addressed the council. "Let this be a message to the galaxy," Nathan said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "We did not seek this conflict, but now that we are in it, we will not back down. The Drakari will learn what it means to face humanity's defiance." The council fell into a heavy silence. They had seen many species fight, many species survive, but this was different. The cold calculation in Nathan's voice, the resolve of his brother, and the unwavering stance of the human researchers spoke volumes. Humanity might not have the sheer might of the Drakari, but they had something far more dangerous, a will to survive, a belief in themselves that no enemy could extinguish. The final shot of the footage showed the Drakari forces faltering, retreating in confusion. For the first time, they were on the defensive. The humans, though vastly outnumbered, had gained the upper hand. The council began to take notice, and a quiet realization began to spread among the representatives. Humanity was not to be dismissed. As the footage ended, the council chamber was filled with a heavy, reflective silence. Nathan turned to face the assembled council members. "This is who we are, and we will not be ignored." The Drakari had retreated, their movements frantic, but not without resistance. The battle had raged for hours, the outpost shaking under the power of their weaponry, the cries of the injured filling the cold, unforgiving air. Yet despite their superior numbers, the Drakari were losing ground, the tide of war slowly turning in favor of the humans. Alaric Rhodes stood near the command console, his eyes scanning the live footage as the Drakari forces regrouped. His mind raced with calculations, every move they made a potential opening. He could feel it, the coming storm, the calm before the true power of humanity was unleashed. "Defiance here," came the voice of one of the officers over the intercom. The news hit the team like a shockwave. The USS Defiant was not just a ship, it was their final hope. The cavalry had arrived. The massive warship dropped out of hyperspace with an eerie precision, its form cutting through the cold expanse like a blade through fog. Its hull was sleek, streamlined, designed for one purpose: total annihilation when necessary. "Deploying systems," Captain Elena Gray's voice rang through the intercom, commanding and steady. A massive laser plasma display lit up the tactical command center, showing the incoming human vessel as it neared the outpost. To the untrained eye, the Defiant might have seemed like just another ship, sleek, efficient, and unassuming. But for those who had experienced its wrath, they knew better. A dark, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the atmosphere as the ship powered its advanced systems. The laser plasma displays on the walls showed the precise trajectory of the Drakari forces as they scrambled to regroup, unaware of the technological storm approaching. "Activate gravity manipulators," Captain Gray ordered, her fingers flying over the tactical display as she initiated the weapon systems. In the blink of an eye, the landscape around the Drakari forces warped as the manipulators altered the gravitational field. It wasn't enough to kill, not yet. It was meant to disorient, to confuse. The Drakari soldiers stumbled, their bodies jerked in unexpected directions, their weapons firing wildly into the air. The battlefield shifted into chaos as the human forces took advantage of the confusion. "Deploy nanite systems," Captain Gray commanded, her voice unwavering. The nanites, a gift from humanity's advanced technology, flooded the battlefield. Invisible to the Drakari, they silently penetrated every inch of the enemy's life support systems. Within seconds, the Drakari soldiers began to drop like flies, their bodies collapsing into the dirt as their vital systems failed. They never saw it coming. The footage from the outpost streamed into the council chamber, displaying the devastation unfolding in real time. The Galactic Council fell into a stunned silence as they watched humanity's hidden power unfold. The advanced technology they had dismissed as mere rumors was now a very real and very terrifying force. The Drakari were no longer the threat. The humans had become the apex predators of the galaxy. The council members, representatives of species that had long thought themselves untouchable, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Their faces, once mocking and dismissive, were now painted with disbelief and fear. They had believed humanity was still in its infancy, its technology inferior, its military abilities laughable. But as the footage continued, they were forced to confront the overwhelming truth. The humans were far from weak. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Zixel, his voice barely audible. He leaned forward, his eyes glued to the display. "They've surpassed us." As the Drakari ship continued to falter under the barrage of nanite systems and gravity distortions, Captain Gray gave the order to initiate the final strike. The display shifted to show a focused, deadly attack on the Drakari command ship, its energy shields flickering under the pressure of the human assault. The Drakari had no idea what had hit them. They were caught between two terrifyingly advanced human technologies, the nanites that disarmed them at a molecular level, and the gravity manipulators that disoriented them, rendering their weapons useless. The tide of battle had turned completely. The outpost, once under siege, now stood victorious. The remaining Drakari soldiers, their forces crippled by the human technology, had no choice but to retreat. In the council chamber, the silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity. Every representative, from the ancient Morvani to the insectoid Zelari, sat frozen, their minds struggling to reconcile what they were seeing with their previous assumptions about humanity. How had they missed this? How had they underestimated a species capable of such technological and military mastery? Nathan Rhodes stood resolute before the council, his face solemn, but his eyes burning with a quiet fire. He knew what the council had seen, and he knew it would change everything. "We are not the weaklings you thought we were," Nathan's voice echoed through the chamber. "You saw the truth in that footage. Humanity will never cower to threats again. We don't seek war, but when we're pushed to the edge, we will fight, and we will win." The representatives looked at each other, their expressions shifting from disbelief to reluctant admiration. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They had shown their strength, their technological prowess, and their ability to stand firm against overwhelming odds. The Drakari forces were routed, their ship disabled, their morale shattered. The council, once filled with mockery, now found themselves questioning their past assumptions. They had underestimated humanity's power. They had underestimated the lengths humanity was willing to go to protect their own. And as the footage ended, with the U.S. Defiant looming in the background, its weapons standing down, but its presence as ominous as ever, the council members sat in stunned silence. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and they knew it. Humanity was no longer to be ignored. The lights in the interrogation room flickered with a cold, sterile hum, casting long shadows across the floor. Captain Elena Gray stood before the bound Drakari commander, Vorkar, his once proud stature now reduced to that of a defeated prisoner. His once steely gaze was now clouded with uncertainty and fear. The arrogance that had marked his previous demeanor had evaporated, replaced with the grim realization that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. Elena paced in front of the table where Vorkar sat, his body stiff and unmoving. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on both of them. For Elena, this was the moment to finalize humanity's message. For Vorkar, it was the moment when he realized the true depth of his mistake. "Vorkar," Elena began, her voice calm but laden with purpose, "you came to Epsilon Indy 4 believing that humanity was weak. You thought that the galaxy's oldest species could be toppled with a few strikes. You were wrong." Vorkar didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he stared at the floor, a silent admission of his failure. The Drakari commander had believed the tales, the myth of human frailty, the stories of how they had only recently gained space travel, how they were so far behind the older races of the galaxy. He had never imagined that humans, seemingly so young in the galactic community, could wield such power. "You're right," Elena continued, her tone unwavering. "We're not the warriors you've encountered before. We're not some species built on ancient conquest or steeped in centuries of war. But we've been at war. Our entire history is one of conflict, survival, and reinvention. You failed to see that. You underestimated us. Vorkar's eyes flickered for a moment, his lips twitching as though he might respond. But the words didn't come. He clenched his fists, the silence heavy between them. Elena stepped closer, her boots clicking softly against the cold metal floor. She stood tall, looking down at the Drakari commander, the weight of her words carrying the full force of humanity's resolve. "Do you understand now, Vorkar?" she asked, her voice dropping to a quiet intensity. "This wasn't about survival. This was about the future of the galaxy." Vorkar's face twitched as if he wanted to speak, to defend his people's actions. But he knew better now. The power that humanity had displayed was undeniable. The technology they had used to neutralize the Drakari forces had been far beyond anything he could have imagined. The nanite weapons, the gravity manipulators. He had never known a species capable of such precise, lethal force. Elena didn't wait for a response. She activated the laser plasma display above the table. The holographic image shimmered into view, showing the aftermath of the battle on Epsilon Indy 4. The devastated Drakari forces lay scattered across the planet's surface, their ships wrecked and their personnel incapacitated by humanity's devastatingly efficient counterattack. "The humans did not seek vengeance," Elena said, her voice sharp and controlled. "What you've seen here, this isn't the result of rage or fear. It's the result of careful calculation and strategy." She let the words hang in the air, the silence of the room heavy with the weight of what she had said. The council had seen the footage. They had witnessed humanity's strength firsthand. It wasn't just the military prowess that had stunned them. It was the restraint, the wisdom in their response. The council had expected humanity to lash out, to retaliate with unchecked aggression. They had not anticipated the strategic approach, the way humanity had displayed their power, but without using it recklessly. They had shown their strength, but they had also shown their wisdom in knowing when to hold back. "You don't understand, do you?" Elena continued, her eyes now locked onto Vorkar's. "You think that what we've done here was an act of vengeance. But you're wrong. What we've done is give you a message to the galaxy." Vorkar's eyes darted toward the display, the weight of her words sinking in. He realized then that the humans were not only capable of unimaginable destruction, they were also capable of something the Drakari had never understood: restraint, the ability to know when to strike and when to hold back. This was a power that could shift the balance of the galaxy. Elena's expression softened ever so slightly as she turned away from Vorkar and glanced at the laser plasma display once more. "You're here, alive, because we chose not to annihilate you." "We could have," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of the decision. "But we didn't. We could have wiped your species from existence, but we gave you a chance to change, to learn, to adapt." The room was silent, the only sound the low hum of the ventilation system overhead. Elena's words were piercing through the cold walls of the chamber, settling deep into the consciousness of both the Drakari commander and the representatives of the council who were watching from afar. "You have one chance, Vorkar," Elena said. "One chance to take this back to your people, to show them that humans are not a species to be feared, but a species to be respected. We are not the children of the galaxy, but we are not its executioners either. We are its equals, and will treat you with the same respect we demand from others." Vorkar remained silent. The weight of her words crushed him. The arrogance, the swagger, the sense of superiority that had once defined the Drakari commander were gone, replaced by the crushing realization that he had misjudged humanity. The humans had not come to conquer the galaxy. They had come to coexist with it, but they had come prepared, prepared to defend themselves when pushed, prepared to ensure that their future, and the future of those they cared for, was secure. As the room fell into a somber silence, Elena leaned forward, her voice steady. "I want your people to understand that this wasn't a fluke. This was a warning. Humanity won't start the war, but we will finish it. That's our message." Vorkar finally met her gaze, the last vestiges of his pride melting away. He nodded once, slowly, his voice hoarse as he spoke. "I will deliver your message. The galaxy will know." Elena nodded, then turned away, the weight of the moment settling over her. She knew that what she had said, what humanity had shown, would change the course of galactic history. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The dim glow of the laser plasma display flickered to life, casting long shadows across the interrogation room. Vorkar, the Drakari commander, sat stiffly in his restraints, his pride thoroughly crushed. The reality of his defeat weighed heavily on him, but there was something more, something he had not anticipated. The humans had shown not just their power, but their restraint, and that was the true weapon they wielded. He had misjudged them, and now he had no choice but to deliver their message to his people. He glanced at Captain Elena Gray, who stood at the edge of the room, her posture straight and confident. She had made it clear that he would leave this room with only one responsibility: to relay humanity's message, a message that would reverberate throughout the galaxy. The Council, who had once mocked humanity, now awaited the outcome of this moment. "Do you understand, Vorkar?" Elena asked, her voice calm yet firm. "You are going to send a message, not just to your people, but to the entire galaxy." Vorkar's eyes flickered with the faintest trace of defiance, but he did not speak. Instead, he stared at the laser plasma display, now projecting a communication link that would send his words to the Drakari fleet and ultimately to their high command. Elena stepped aside, giving him the space to speak. His voice came out low and strained, his words heavy with the weight of his defeat. "I speak now for the Drakari Imperium," Vorkar began, his voice a rough rasp. "The humans, they are not what we expected. Their strength is beyond what we had imagined. I once believed them to be weak, primitive, an easy prey for our forces. I was wrong." He paused, his eyes narrowing as he looked down at the floor. The pride that had once defined him had evaporated, leaving only the stark reality of the situation. The humans had not just defended themselves, they had proven their superiority, not by force alone, but by the very restraint they had shown in their response. "The humans are not a species to be underestimated," Vorkar continued, his tone now laced with a grudging respect. "They have weapons we have never seen before. Their technology is far ahead of what we thought possible. And their resolve, there is no other species that fights with such purpose." He lifted his gaze to the camera, his voice barely a whisper. "The Drakari now recognize the power of humanity. They are a species that will not be easily pushed aside. Their message is clear. They will not bow to any species, not even to us." As Vorkar finished speaking, the laser plasma display switched off, leaving the room in an eerie silence. Elena watched him carefully, the gravity of the situation settling over them both. Vorkar had sent the message, but his eyes betrayed a new understanding. He had seen humanity's true potential, and it had left him shaken. The scene shifted. In the Grand Council chamber, the representatives sat in tense silence. They had watched the footage, seen humanity's strength displayed through the USS Defiance strategic strike against the Drakari. The technology, the weapons, the military precision, it had all been laid bare before them. But it wasn't just the display of power that had left them in awe. It was the calm, controlled manner in which humanity had handled the situation. Nathan Rhodes, the human ambassador, stood before the council now. His hands were clasped behind his back, his demeanor calm, but his words were weighty. The laughter that had filled the chamber earlier was long gone. In its place was a deep, thoughtful silence, a recognition that humanity had earned the council's respect, not through force alone, but through wisdom. "I know that you've all been watching," Nathan began, his voice steady, "and I know that you've seen the footage. You've seen the strength humanity is capable of. But more importantly, you've seen that we do not seek conflict. We do not seek war. Our goal, as it has always been, is peace. But we will defend ourselves, and we will defend our future." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. The council members shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging glances, while others remained still, their minds processing the magnitude of what had just unfolded. "We understand the dangers that exist in the galaxy," Nathan continued. "We understand that we are not the oldest species, nor are we the most powerful. But we also understand that we cannot afford to remain passive. We cannot remain naive. We are a young species, but we are not foolish, and we will no longer be underestimated. The room was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. For the first time, the council members were no longer laughing. They were not mocking humanity. They were reflecting. They were beginning to understand that humanity was not a species of untempered rage, but one that had learned the cost of conflict and had chosen to embrace strategy, diplomacy, and above all, restraint. Humans do not seek to dominate the galaxy, Nathan said, his voice growing more resolute. We seek to coexist, but let there be no mistake. If pushed, if threatened, we will defend ourselves, and we will do so with everything we have. The council watched in stunned silence as Nathan's words settled in. There was no longer any mockery, no longer any laughter. There was only the quiet acknowledgement that humanity, once thought to be a weak and inexperienced species, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. Nathan's eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of each council member. "We are not here to ask for permission," he said softly. "We are here to show you that we will not be pushed around. We are here to show you that we are worthy of respect, not because of what we've done, but because of what we will do when we are tested." The room remained silent, the gravity of his words settling over the representatives like a weight. The mockery that had once greeted humanity's proposal was now replaced with a deep, reflective silence. It was clear that the council had begun to see humanity in a new light. No longer were they viewed as weak, as an afterthought in the galaxy's grand chessboard. Now humanity was a species to be respected. The final moment of the council's deliberation was quiet, reflective. The weight of the decision hung in the air as the representatives prepared to vote. It was clear to everyone in the room that humanity had shifted the balance. No longer would they be seen as insignificant. The galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's true place within it. Nathan stood at the center of the room, his posture straight, his eyes steady. He had delivered his message, and he knew that the council would make its decision. Whatever the outcome, humanity had taken its first step toward defining its future in the galaxy. A future not defined by fear, but by strength, strength rooted in wisdom and restraint. The council chamber had descended into a heavy stillness. Gone were the moments of laughter, the dismissive glances, the underestimation of humanity. Now the room was filled with quiet deliberation, with only the soft hum of laser plasma displays punctuating the silence. The representatives, each with their own thoughts and fears, turned their attention to the vast display above them, showing the results of their careful consideration. They had seen the footage. They had heard Nathan Rhodes' words. And now they had to make a decision that would shape the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. Grand Arbiter Vexor, as ever, remained composed. His translucent skin, which once pulsed with amusement, now glowed faintly with the weight of the decision he would help guide. His ancient eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle shifts in the council members' posture. The Athi, Counselor Zixtol, was no longer so quick to speak. His sharp tongue seemed dulled, his earlier mockery replaced by caution. The Zalari Hive representative, usually so distant and aloof, was leaning forward in her seat, her many eyes trained on the screen with something resembling curiosity. Vexor's voice, when it finally cut through the silence, was deep and measured, carrying the weight of centuries. "We have seen the evidence," he said. "We have heard the message. Humanity has revealed both its strength and its restraint. But the question remains, what does this mean for us? What does it mean for the galaxy?" There was a murmur in the room as the council members exchanged glances. The topic of discussion, once something laughed off as absurd, had grown into a matter of utmost importance. The humans, it seemed, were not the naive and weak species they had once thought. The footage had shown them not just surviving, but thriving in the face of adversity. They had not only stood up to a superior enemy, but had done so with a measured, strategic hand. Their advanced technology, once hidden and underestimated, had proven to be something the galaxy had not expected. Sixtol was the first to break the silence. His voice, still smooth and calculated, was tinged with something new. "We, the Athi, have seen many species come and go," he began, his tone uncharacteristically respectful. "But none have shown the kind of restraint that humans have. They could have wiped out the Drakari, but they chose not to. They have technologies that we could not fathom, and yet they exercise control. He paused, his four-fingered hand tapping on the table. I was wrong. Humans are not a threat to the galaxy, but they could be. They have the power to reshape everything. And that is a power we must respect. Vexer nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he processed Zixtal's words. This is not an easy decision, he said quietly, but it is one that must be made. The chamber fell quiet once again, the tension palpable as the council members considered the implications. To add humanity to the restricted species list was to acknowledge that they were capable of great power. But it was also to acknowledge that humanity had the wisdom to know when not to wield that power. It was a recognition of their potential, both for destruction and for peace. Do we have a motion? Vexer asked, turning his gaze to the council. The decision was in their hands now. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. The process was slow, each vote a deliberate moment in history. The laser plasma displays flickered above them, showing the tally. With every passing moment, the weight of the decision grew heavier. When the final vote was cast, Vexer raised his hands, the chamber falling silent once again. The motion passes, he declared, his voice carrying a mix of respect and caution. Humans are now subject to the containment protocols of Galactic Law 5962. They will be added to the restricted species list, not with mockery, but with the understanding that their potential must be carefully managed. Nathan Rhodes stood before them, the weight of the moment settling over him. The council had made their decision, but this was not a victory in the traditional sense. There was no celebration, no applause. There was only the quiet acknowledgement that humanity had proven its worth, not through violence, but through wisdom. Thank you, Grand Arbiter, Nathan said quietly, his voice calm but filled with a quiet strength. He turned to face the council, his gaze sweeping over the room. We understand that this decision is not one made lightly, but know this, humanity will honor the protocols. We will respect the council's decision, and we will continue to strive for peace, even as we acknowledge the strength we now know we possess. Vexer watched him for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, the glow of his veins dimming as he processed the magnitude of what had just transpired. Your words carry weight, Ambassador, he said softly, and they will carry weight throughout the galaxy. As the council session concluded, Vexer stepped aside, allowing the representatives to file out of the chamber. Nathan remained in place, standing tall, his expression solemn but resolute. This was the moment when humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through force but through a measured, strategic approach to the galaxy's dangers. In the quiet of his chambers, Vexer stood alone, staring out at the stars through the transparent walls of the council building. His mind was still racing, processing the events of the day. Humanity's place in the galaxy had shifted. The decision had been made, but the question still lingered in his mind. What would humanity become in the centuries to come? He was not sure what the future held for them, but one thing was certain. The galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of something new, something that had the potential to change everything. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was time for the galaxy to learn to respect humanity, not just as a species of potential, but as a force that would shape the future, for better or for worse. Vexer turned away from the stars, his thoughts heavy with the weight of the decision he had just overseen. The council laughed at your proposal yesterday, Ambassador. No one is laughing today, he murmured to himself. With a final glance at the stars, he left the chamber, knowing that the galaxy had just entered a new era. The months following the council's decision passed in a haze of diplomatic exchanges, military recalibrations, and strategic shifts. Humanity's newfound place in the galaxy was both an acknowledgement of power and a heavy burden. The Drakari, once a looming threat and dismissive of human capabilities, now approached the table of diplomacy with a newfound humility. The arrogance they once held towards humanity had crumbled, replaced by an urgency to understand the species that had turned the tide in their favor. Nathan Rhodes sat in his quarters aboard the USS Defiant, staring out into the expanse of space. The stars seemed more distant now, each one a reminder that humanity's role had changed. No longer the young species finding its footing in the cosmos, humanity had proved itself a force to be reckoned with, not through dominance, but through wisdom and strategic restraint. Do you ever think about the future? Elena Gray's voice broke through his reverie. She stepped into the room, the soft click of her boots echoing in the stillness. Nathan turned toward her, offering a small, tired smile. All the time. I just don't know what to expect anymore. Elena leaned against the bulkhead, her gaze fixed on the stars as well. I've been in enough negotiations to know that when power shifts like this, it's never simple. There's always someone waiting to take advantage of it. That's what worries me, Nathan admitted, turning back to the window. We've earned their respect. But at what cost? Respect comes with expectations, and we're not prepared for all of them. Elena's eyes narrowed. The Drakari may be seeking diplomacy now, but there are others watching us. This galaxy is full of ancient species, and they won't forget what we did so quickly. Some will fear us. Others will want to use us. Nathan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It's not the fear I'm worried about. It's the desire to control what we've built. We've shown the Council what we can do, and I'm afraid it might lead to someone else thinking they can take it from us. There was a pause before Elena spoke again, her voice more somber this time. Humanity's strength isn't just in our technology or our tactics. It's in our ability to adapt, to see the bigger picture. We'll have to keep proving that over and over. Nathan's gaze drifted back to the stars, his thoughts heavy with the burden of responsibility. We've fought our battles on Earth, and now we're fighting for our place among the stars. It feels like we're being tested every step of the way. Elena stepped closer, her presence a grounding force. And we'll keep passing those tests, Nathan. We have to. Meanwhile, on the Council side, a quiet but significant shift was taking place. The Drakari, under the guidance of their new diplomatic envoy, Vesakar, began sending formal requests for discussions with humanity. No longer eager for conflict, they sought to formalize a relationship with Earth, something that, mere months ago, seemed unfathomable. The Drakari had once seen themselves as superior, but now, after their defeat, they recognized humanity's potential to shape the galaxy in ways they had never considered. Vesakar stood in the council chamber, speaking to the representatives of the Galactic Council. His armor, once a symbol of conquest, was now replaced by the formal garb of a diplomat. He had spent months traveling to Earth, negotiating with human officials, trying to understand the people who had not only survived but thrived in the face of overwhelming odds. We, the Drakari Imperium, recognize the strength and restraint shown by humanity. Vesakar's voice echoed through the chamber, his words formal but tinged with genuine respect. It is not merely the power you wield, but the wisdom you choose to exercise. We ask that the Galactic Council support the formation of diplomatic ties between our two species, so that the mistakes of the past can be avoided. The Council members, once so sure of their dominance over the galaxy, now listen intently. No laughter followed Vesakar's words, only thoughtful silence. For the first time in the Council's long history, a species that had once been regarded as a nuisance was now on equal footing with the galaxy's oldest powers. The transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. In the United Earth Government headquarters, President Eleanor Rivera stood before a group of advisors, her expression a mix of determination and concern. The decision made by the Galactic Council had brought humanity into the fold, but it had also brought new challenges. As much as the galaxy now acknowledged humanity's strength, there were still those who would see Earth as a threat, a resource, or a tool to be manipulated. Humanity has come a long way in a short time, President Rivera began, her voice steady but laden with the weight of leadership. But this new position is a double-edged sword. We've been given a seat at the table, but the question is, what will we do with it? Her chief advisor, Commander Adrian Porter, stepped forward, holding a tablet with the latest reports. We've already begun formalizing our treaties with the Drakari. They seem genuine in their desire for peace, but we must proceed carefully. Others are watching. Agreed, Rivera replied. We can't let this opportunity slip, but we also can't afford to let our guard down. The Council has acknowledged us, but that doesn't mean they trust us completely. Not yet. Porter nodded, his expression thoughtful. And there are still the challenges back home. The military-industrial complex has already begun pressing for more autonomy, and the idea of taking full control of Earth's defenses is gaining traction. President Rivera's gaze darkened. We'll have to address that, but for now our focus must be on diplomacy. We need to make the galaxy see that we're not just strong, but we're responsible with that strength. Back aboard the USS Defiant, Nathan and Elena were no longer just representatives of Earth. They were ambassadors of humanity's future. Their actions had set a new course for humanity, and now the task ahead was one of balance. Maintaining the peace, nurturing the alliances, and guarding against the threats that would inevitably come. Elena turned to Nathan as they stood together on the bridge, watching the stars streak past them. "What's next for us, Nathan?" He looked at her, a determined glint in his eyes. "We take our place in the galaxy, not as conquerors but as players. We've earned their respect. Now we need to show them what that respect means." As the Defiant sailed deeper into the unknown, Nathan Rhodes knew that humanity's journey was just beginning. There would be more tests, more challenges, and more opportunities to prove themselves. But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer a species to be laughed at. They had earned their place among the stars, and they would protect it, no matter the cost. The galaxy hummed with change. Once a distant, almost forgotten corner of the stars, humanity had thrust itself into the center of galactic affairs. What had started as a desperate plea for survival had evolved into a respected position, where Earth's voice now resonated alongside the galaxy's ancient powers. Nathan Rhodes stood at the forefront of this new era, the weight of his journey not lost on him. His rise from the humbling mockery of the Galactic Council to a respected ambassador was the culmination of humanity's unpredictable, yet inevitable path. Nathan stood in the observation deck of the USS Defiant, staring at the stars. A part of him wanted to see the grandeur of space for what it was, a vast, uncharted frontier, but another part of him felt the weight of what had been accomplished. He wasn't just representing Earth anymore. He was carrying the future of humanity. "You're quiet," Elena Gray's voice broke through his thoughts. She had been with him through it all. Every battle, every negotiation, every moment of uncertainty. "Just reflecting," Nathan replied, his voice soft but firm. "Everything's changed. We've proven ourselves. But now it feels like we have to hold this position." "You're right," Elena said, stepping beside him. "There are those who'll see us as a threat, and those who'll try to take advantage of our position. We're not just survivors anymore. We're players in a much bigger game." Nathan nodded. "I know, but that's why I'm here. We have to make sure that humanity doesn't just survive, but thrives in this galaxy. Not through force, but through strategy, diplomacy, and sometimes knowing when to fight." Back in the heart of the Galactic Council, the mood was different. The once ridiculous notion of humanity's strength had transformed into a sobering reality. Representatives who had laughed at the idea of humans as a threat now looked at Earth with caution, respect, and a little bit of fear. Grand Arbiter Vexer stood at the center of the chamber, his translucent skin pulsing with an eerie light as he addressed the assembly. "The Drakari have requested a formal treaty with humanity," Vexer began, his voice resonating through the vast hall. "It is a significant moment, not just for us, but for the entire galaxy. The power dynamics have shifted, and humanity's role is no longer a question of what we fear, but of what we can learn from them." His words echoed in the silence that followed. The council, once full of dismissive laughter and skepticism, was now filled with representatives contemplating the implications of this new reality. The Drakari had changed their stance, and in doing so, had demonstrated the weight of humanity's strategic thinking and technological might. Vesekar, the Drakari envoy, stood as he was invited to speak. The once defiant commander now carried the title of diplomat, his stance less arrogant and more cautious. "Humanity has shown that they are not to be underestimated," Vesekar said, his voice low but respectful. "We, the Drakari, wish to formalize our relationship with Earth, not as conquerors but as equals." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The shift in tone from the once disparaging species was impossible to ignore. The Drakari, long a symbol of brutal strength and ruthless conquest, were now seeking peaceful relations with the species they once scorned. and it was humanity that had forced this change. Nathan sat in the council chamber, facing the representatives of the Galactic Council. His proposal had been approved, but the weight of it was only beginning to sink in. This wasn't just about power. It wasn't just about strength. It was about balance. Humanity had earned its place, not by dominating others, but by demonstrating restraint and wisdom when the galaxy was watching. We don't seek conflict, Nathan's voice was steady, yet filled with conviction. But when pushed, we will defend ourselves. Not out of spite, but because we understand the cost of peace. We've built a legacy of survival, but we're ready to build a future of cooperation. His words resonated through the chamber, and for the first time, the council wasn't just listening, they were acknowledging. Councillor Zixtal, who had once ridiculed humanity, spoke up. The Athi Confederation formally endorses humanity's position in the galaxy. We see now that their strength is not just in their weapons, but in their understanding of what it means to use them. Nathan's gaze shifted to the faces of the council members. Each one reflected a different emotion: respect, caution, curiosity. They understood now. Humanity was not to be feared as an uncontrollable force, but to be respected as a species that had mastered the balance between power and diplomacy. The Drakkari's formalization of a treaty with Earth was a historic moment, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. In the corridors of power, both on Earth and across the galaxy, discussions began. Allies were sought, new alliances formed, and the task of balancing humanity's growing influence with the established powers was underway. But even with the treaties signed, even with the new alliances in place, Nathan knew that peace wasn't guaranteed. "We've proven ourselves," he said, "but now the real work begins. We have to show that humanity doesn't just belong in the galaxy, we can lead it." Elena, who had stood by him through the darkest moments, now stood as a partner in this new chapter. "And we will, together." As the USS Defiant sailed into the stars, the galaxy watched with bated breath. Humanity was no longer an unknown entity, a species struggling to find its place among giants. They were a force to be reckoned with. But more than that, they were a species who understood the power of restraint, the value of diplomacy, and the necessity of strength when the time came. Nathan stood on the observation deck once more, watching as the stars stretched out before him. This time, the horizon didn't feel so far away. "We're not just a species of warriors, Elena," Nathan said, his voice firm. "We're a species of survivors, of diplomats, of thinkers. And the galaxy needs to understand that. Now it's time to shape the future." The Defiant cut through the vastness of space, and humanity's place in the stars was no longer uncertain. It was secure, and it would be earned time and time again by those who understood what it meant to stand firm when others doubted.